Sing to me of the man, Muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course, once he had plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Welcome to the Stoned-Ape-Podcast. I'm Wes, and today we'll be talking about Homer's Odyssey. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is coming out this week, and I wanted to dive into this one and see how true it stays to the poem. We'll eventually do the Iliad and The Aeneid as well, and I believe in high school English class we talked about the Odyssey, and we may have even read it. But other than having a vague idea about the story, I wouldn't say I remember very much. We're going to break down all 24 books of this poem, and it is an epic poem, if you didn't know already. For this research, we used Robert Fagle's translation of the Odyssey. Let's meet some Greek gods and learn about Odysseus' long journey home. But before that, let's light up. And today, I'm going to be smoking from a brand called Avenue. So from what I found on Avenue, I believe it is like a top-tier house brand of True Leaf, my local dispensary here in Maricopa. And online, it says what they're about. It says, when you are a cannabis connoisseur, you want to expand your mind and refine your taste. You want to explore the limits of enjoyment. Explore the limits with Avenue. Our small batch handcrafted flower is cultivated to deliver a powerful and unexpected experience. Like your favorite city street, Avenue can always show you something new. And I will say, as far as like the house brands of True Leaf, it's one of my favorite ones. I feel like the bud is always pretty much top tier. I can get to be a bit of a weed snob at times, and, when I'm judging my weed on kind of how good it is, I look at all different aspects of it, more than just, kind of the high it gives you, the flavor it is, kind of the buds itself. I like a spongy type bud where you can just kind of pull it off, throw it in the grinder, and not have to worry about it being stemmy or anything like that. And that's what kind of bud this is. And the strain that I got is called the White crossed with C99. I will say with some of these house brands, they don't get real wild with the names. I believe they do have some kind of weird name, Avenue strings. But a lot of times with the house brands, I find that they're just going to call them, whatever they are, whatever they're kind of crossed with. So the lineage of this is the White crossed with C99, the same thing that the name is. And on True Leaf's website, it says the White and C99 pairs two iconic parents, creating a profile that's crisp, bright, and playful. Frosty buds sharp with tropical terps. The inhale is light and refreshing, leaving the palate energized. As a sativa, it leans uplifting and clear, perfect for daytime clarity. All right, and it is a sativa, and the grow that I got, this is actually written pretty damn small here. Got my glasses on too. It says the total THC is 26.74%. So, 26 isn't as high as you can get, but it is pretty high. Online, the one I'm looking at says 25.45. And that's why you can't just go online and, check out the strain that you have. They're all specific to the grows that they have. I know in Mississippi, it seemed to be normal for them to put the terp level. I feel like I don't see it anywhere on here. I don't see it anywhere on the jar, but I feel like when I bought it online, it did have like the terps on there. It said like 3%. Oh, here it is. 2.23. So it's not 3%. This is not super low. It's not super high. But anyway, that's what we got tonight. That's what we're going to be getting down on. So if you want to leave me a comment or send me an email, let me know what you're smoking when you're listening to the show. And I don't know if this is the same strain. It seems like it, but I found something on Leafly. It just calls it White 99. It says it's a potent hybrid marijuana strain. It does have on the meters, it's almost fully energized. It's got a high THC and high energized, and it's crossed Cinderella 99 with the White. And I believe that's what C99 is. So this could be the same strain. Like I said, on Leafly, they just call it White 99. Let's see what the flavors say. Citrus, pine, and lemon. Taste the pine. Maybe a hint of lemon there. And on Leafly here, it does say the effects are uplifted, focused, and euphoric. All right, but it's a nice little bud here. Again, if you get a chance to get some Avenue, it's not going to be bad, more than likely. All right, so first we'll talk about what we know about Homer, which isn't too much. The epic poems written by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are thought to have been written down around the mid-8th century, so like the mid-700s. These poems are thought to have been passed down orally until Homer finally wrote them down. Or maybe Homer was a group of men over time. This is also a popular theory. Also, on top of all that, Homer is believed to have for some reason been deaf and blind. And this poem's really freaking long, around 140,000 words. That's basically all we know about Homer. But these works are attributed to him. And something that just popped up in my burnout brain is, isn't this equivalent to finding an epic poem written by Helen Keller? All right, we're going to get into it. Book 1. Book 1 starts out by stating all the soldiers have made it home except for one man. He has been held captive on an island by a bewitching nymph, Calypso, who is holding the man to be her husband. But the man doesn't want to be there, and he longs for his home, Ithaca. While this is happening, the Greek gods are looking down with pity from Mount Olympus, except for one god, Poseidon. Poseidon was gone at the moment. He was a world away in Ethiopia to receive his offerings of bulls and rams. We're just going to go with this Ethiopian thing. But just to know, Ethiopia in ancient Greek times, it meant south of Egypt. It's not talking about the current East African nation we know, but it is going to get a little weird. And while Poseidon was off doing that, the other Olympian gods talked to the father of men and gods, Zeus. They spoke of Agamemnon's son, Orestes, who killed Aegisthus and his own mother. So we're talking about Orestes killed his mother. Aegisthus stole Agamemnon's wife, even though Hermes, the giant killer, told him that revenge will come from Orestes if he continues. But Aegisthus wouldn't listen. Classic Aegisthus, just doing his own shit, not caring about any others. And speaking of this matter, Athena, Zeus's daughter, thought Aegisthus' death was well-deserved. But this man being held captive, his name is Odysseus, and she believed he did not deserve his current fate. And Zeus reminded her that Poseidon was forever fuming over the fact that Odysseus had blinded his son, the Cyclops, Polyphemus, born from the nymph Thoosa. And though Poseidon would not kill Odysseus, he has driven him far from his homeward course. Athena pleaded with her father that Odysseus deserves to go home and that she should go to Ithaca herself to rouse his son Telemachus with courage to speak his mind to all the suitors at his place and go find the news of his father. Since Odysseus had been gone so long, his home had been overrun by men competing for the affections from Penelope, Odysseus' wife, and these were called suitors. There was 108 of them. These men also were eating all his food and drinking all his wine, bleeding his palace basically dry. None of them seemed like good stepdad material, if you know what I mean. Anyway, Athena tells Telemachus to get his crew ready and go see Menelaus in Sparta and learn of his father, and she does this by taking the form of Mentor, the son of wise old Aeacus. She told him that she had heard of his father and that he was not dead, but the gods thwart his return home. Telemachus does what she says and readies his crew for their journey. Mentor, by the way, was an old trusted friend of Odysseus's. Athena takes his form to inspire the men, and this is where we get the modern term mentor. Book 2. So the next day, as dawn rose, Telemachus sprang from his bed, got dressed, grabbed his sword, and put on his sandals. He summoned his crew of Archaeans and made ready for his depart. Before he left, he told the suitors they should be ashamed of themselves, and when his pops got back, they would feel his wrath. The suitors later get to talking and decide that Penelope has been leading them on for 4 years now, building up their hopes. They believe that Odysseus is indeed dead, and the logical thing to do was to devise a plan to kill his son before he builds up an army from Pyros and Sparta to kill them. Later that night, Athena brings a deep sleep over the suitors, and after taking the form of Telemachus and having the crew prepare for their departure, she goes to Telemachus and walks with him to the ship, and this time she's in the form of Mentor. Telemachus shouted out commands to his crew, and the ship went plunging all night long through the dawn. Book 3. When the ship pulled into Pylos, people were lined up on the beach sacrificing bulls to Poseidon. There were 9 divisions of 500, and that's a bunch of people there, 4,500 people on the beach sacrificing 9 bulls. They were also tasting their innards and burning the thigh bones for the gods. Telemachus followed Athena, still in the form of mentor. She told him the words he would find to inspire power within him and lead him to Nestor, who urged them to sit and feast. He gave them some of the innards and some wine. Finally, after having their fill of food and drink, Telemachus asked about his father, and Nestor told him of the many battles fought around King Priam's walls and of the fall of Ajax and Achilles. For 9 years they fought until Zeus awarded them victory. With Zeus and the sheer cunning of Odysseus, the battle was finally won. After departing from the beach, they reached Tenedos quickly and sacrificed the gods for a quick return. But a quick return was not within Zeus's plans. With 4 straight days of massive storms as the other crews moored their ships at Argos port, Nestor and his crew held course to Pylos, and that's how he made it home from Troy. Not wanting to talk about his father anymore, Telemachus asked how Agamemnon met his death. He told of how Agamemnon had given Aegisthus strict commands to guard his wife, and Aegisthus swept her off to his own house, lover lusting over lover. Aegisthus killed Agamemnon and lorded over Mycenae for 7 years, but on the 8th year Prince Orestes cut him down. Nestor then warned him of what the suitors might do if he doesn't take care of them, and urged him to go visit Menelaus in Lacedaemon. And I believe Lacedaemon is Sparta, and that's going to be used kind of interchangeably throughout this. Before they departed, animals were sacrificed to Poseidon for a safe trip. Afterwards, Polycaste, Nestor's youngest daughter, bathed Telemachus and rubbed him down with oil and gave him some clothes. Then, along with Nestor's son, Pisistratus, they left the heights of Pylos, fading in their trails. The sun sank as they reached Phaera, where Diocles, son of Artilochus, gave them a royal welcome. And then they slept all night. The next day, as dawn rose, they yoked their stallions again and raced them on as the sun sank and the world grew dark. Book 4. As they made it to Lacedaemon, where they found the Spartan king Menelaus celebrating a double wedding feast for his son born to him by a slave, who was marrying Elector's daughter, and his daughter Hermione, the only child born from Helen of Sparta, or Helen of Troy, was marrying the son of Achilles. I guess you don't want to bring up the Troy thing at this point. I think we're just going to go with Helen of Sparta. Telemachus and Nestor's son were seen by Lord Eteoneus, who brought them to Menelaus. The red-haired king had his guests brought into a feast. Once satisfied with food and drink, he had them washed by women and rubbed them down with some oil. And after being brought bread and appetizers of plenty, they were given wine in golden cups. They were really taking care of these guys. And the visitors tell Menelaus of how great the palace is and how it must be similar to the palace of the gods. But Menelaus wasn't having it. He told them no one could rival Zeus, and told them of his brother, who was killed thanks to the cunning of his cursed murderous queen. So he now rules with no great joy. And then he tells them what he's heard of Telemachus' father, Odysseus, and how he was unsure if Odysseus was alive or dead. After having some more wine with the red-haired king and Helen, Telemachus told them of the suitors at his home and how they were devouring all his wealth and possessions, and this made Menelaus angry. He said Odysseus would give them a quick death or a blood wedding, and then continued his story of his return, of how he had been stranded on an island off the coast of Egypt for 20 days without a breeze at sea. Then Idothea, daughter of Proteus, the shape-shifting sea god, assisted in their return. So basically Menelaus' information wasn't the greatest, and he had not heard of Odysseus meeting his demise or whether he hadn't. While this was happening in Sparta, the suitors back in Ithaca were talking and plotting against Telemachus. They now, instead of waiting on Telemachus' return, decided to board their own ships and ambush the prince at Asteris, a rocky island close to Ithaca. And I'm not going to connect to this kind of B storyline again. I think what happened is Athena got involved and maybe got some mist or something cloudy in the way and blocked them from being able to kind of go through and catch him. I didn't get it too much about that story. With any subject I go over, man, you can also always get a lot deeper in it. I'm just kind of going over the broad story here. All right, Book 5. That's going to be out. So Book 5 begins with the gods in council with Zeus. Athena remembers Odysseus being held captive by Calypso. By this time, it says not one of the people who he ruled remembers him. We find out by the end that's not exactly true. She also recalls how the suitors are trying to kill his son. And Zeus tells Athena Odysseus will return and pay back the suitors that plot against his family. He then turns to his own son, Hermes, the giant-killing god, as messenger to Calypso. So Hermes fastened his ever-glowing sandals, grabbed his wand that enchants the eyes of men, and flew down to Calypso's island. First, Hermes was unable to find Odysseus, who was weeping in anguish. Calypso questioned Hermes, who informs her that this is Zeus's plan, and there's no choice in the matter. This unlucky man, who had fought for Priam's Troy, sacking the city in the 10th year, who lost all his shipmates, was not fated to die on her island. And Zeus commanded her to send him off with good speed to see his loved ones. And after talking with Hermes a bit more, he leaves and Calypso goes to find Odysseus. And at first he did not believe she was allowing him to leave. But after she gave him his fill of food and drink, he was convinced in her sincerity. When young dawn rose, the nymph gave Odysseus a heavy bronze axe and led him to the island's edge, where he had to make his own watercraft. It took him 4 days to build it, and on the 5th day he was off. So he had to make his own craft. I believe Athena gave him some extra powers too. He was like Hulk ripping the trees out of the ground and shit. 18 days later, he could see the Phaeacian islands reaching towards him, but Poseidon saw him while returning from his Ethiopian friends, and this made his fury boil. Outraged that the gods allowed the Ithacan king to return home, he decided to give him a swamping fill of trouble. Poseidon rammed the clouds together with both his hands, clutching his trident, and turned the waves into chaos. As Odysseus is dealing with the chaotic seas, he sees Cadmus' daughter, Ino. I'm going with Ino, it's I-N-O, who was mortal once but now lives in the sea salt's depths, esteemed by all the gods. She asks why the god of earthquakes was so dead set against him, and she tells him to take off all his clothes, leave his craft, and swim to land. She also gave him an immortal scarf to tie around his waist, but after he reaches land he must take it off quickly and throw it into the sea. And this sounds like a tricky-ass scarf. Odysseus decides he'll try like hell to hold on to the boat, and after Poseidon launched a colossal wave, terrible, murderous, arching over him, pounding him down, Odysseus jumped to one single timber and started taking off his clothes like Ino told him. Riding the board like a racehorse and hopefully not acquiring any splinters on his scepter, Odysseus tied the scarf around his waist and dove into the sea. Poseidon wasn't happy about this, but he was trying to make Odysseus' trip a literal trip from hell. Athena showed up to stop the winds in their tracks, and after 2 days and nights at sea, on the 3rd day, Odysseus sees landfall ahead, and is full of joy to see the shore, the trees, and the solid ground. He gets caught up in a reef, but Athena helps him again and inspires him to continue fighting the breakers out of danger. After praying to the gods that the swell smoothed out, Odysseus drifted to shore. The sea had beaten down his heart, his body was swollen, and plenty of brine gushed from his mouth and nostrils. He flung himself on the ground, kissed the green earth, and addressed his fighting spirit to continue. Later he finds a grove, crawls beneath 2 bushy olives sprung from the same root, and Athena showered him with sleep. Book 6. Athena goes to the Phaeacian city where Alcinous ruled, and the gods made him wise. The whole time, Odysseus is still passed out in the deep sleep under the olive trees, and Athena goes to where the king Alcinous' daughter lay. Her name is Nausicaa. It's got 2 A's at the end of it, but I'm going with Nausicaa. Athena basically tells her that her room's a mess. She's got dirty clothes that need to be washed, and she should be ashamed of herself. She tells her that the noblest men will court her, and she needs to get her act together. And don't worry, Athena will help her with this. And the next morning, she should go to her father and go to town where she could go to the washing pools and wash her dirty-ass clothes. And then she flies back to Olympus. The next day, Nausicaa goes to her father, and he doesn't deny her the mules and wagon. I'm not sure how many people were there, but there were stablemen and other maids along for the ride, and they took her to the washing pools. She washed her clothes, and then Nausicaa and her maids take a bath. They rub themselves down with oil and eat while waiting for their clothes to dry. What an odd laundry session. So the washing pools were apparently beside the bushy olives Odysseus was sleeping under, because when they were getting ready to leave, one of her maids tossed her dress, and she dropped it in the water, and they giggled about it like little girls, and this woke Odysseus up. He gets up and covers his junk with a leafy branch, and the maids run away in panic. But not Alcinous' daughter, no. She held fast, for Athena had planted courage in her. Odysseus spoke sly and suave, and told her that he had been through some shit. He asked her for a rag so he could ditch the branch he was holding, and she said she was the king's daughter and could show him around the town. She told him her maids would bathe and feed him, but Odysseus told him he'd take care of it himself, so he washed and bathed and rubbed himself down with oil, and he put on some clothes the princess had given him. Athena made him taller to all eyes, his build more massive now, and down his brow she ran his curls like thick hyacinth clusters full of blossoms. And down to the beach he walked, where they fed him, and then left for the palace to meet the king and the queen of Phaeacia. Book 7. I'm going to get a drink. We're back. We're going to do Book 7. Nausicaa, Odysseus, and her maidens make it back to the city. Nausicaa goes to her bedroom, and Odysseus walks through the city with a heavy mist around him, shielding him. This was from Athena. She does this quite a bit. Athena then takes the form of a young girl holding a pitcher, and she greets Odysseus and shows him where the palace is. And when they get there, she tells him Nausicaa is there, and the first person he will see is her mother, Arete. Arete, I believe, is Poseidon's great-granddaughter. Her father was one of Poseidon's son's kids, and this was the wife of King Alcinous. Athena tells Odysseus if the queen takes him to heart, then there is hope that he will see his loved ones. Then Athena sped away over the barren sea. Odysseus walks in, and he can see this freaking guy's loaded. There's gold and silver and bronze everywhere, and Homer even said that there was gold and silver dogs forged by the god of fire to keep watch on the king's palace. Immortal guard dogs. Odysseus is walking still in the mist until he sees the king and queen, and he throws his arms around the queen's legs, and this is when the mist goes away. And he begs for mercy, and he tells her he's suffered much and asks for a rapid convoy home. So they get him up and wine and dine him, and after everyone else goes off to bed, the king and queen talk to Odysseus. Odysseus tells them about the island of Gygia and Calypso, and how Zeus had crushed his warship, how he had drifted for 9 days, and how his shipmates have all died. And then he had washed up on Calypso's island and spent 7 years there. On the 8th year, she insisted that he sail off and summon the wind to help him leave. And on the 18th day at sea, Odysseus could see Ithaca, but Poseidon, the god of earthquakes, piled wind against him, this fucker, blocking his passage home and throwing him off his craft. Odysseus swam hard AF until he made it to the shore and passed out, and then he woke up to see the king's daughter and her maids. The king liked Odysseus and said the convoy would leave the next day to take him back to his native island. And they had the palace maids make Odysseus a bed, and everyone went to sleep. Book 8. The next day, Alcinous and Odysseus go to the Phaeacia's meeting grounds, and Athena, in the build and voice of the king's herald, roams through the town, telling the lords and captains of Phaeacia to go meet and learn from this stranger. Athena makes Odysseus more massive to all eyes, so they will regard him with kindness. The king rallies the men into taking Odysseus home. 52 sailors went to the ship, and then the king slaughtered a dozen sheep, 8 boars, and a pair of oxen to feed the guests. That's a lot of meat. And during the feast, a famous harper sang the stride between Odysseus and Achilles, and this made Odysseus hide his face so the host would not see his tears. The king notices him and gets everyone's attention and says it's time for the games. First they had a foot race that Clytoneus, the prince, won by far. Then they wrestled and had a jumping contest. Later, a few guys started giving Odysseus some shit because he didn't participate, and eventually he gets fed up for them taunting him and grabs a discus and lets loose with his great hand. Then he tells them that he would compete with anyone at boxing, wrestling, or racing, but not a freaking foot race. With all the beatings he's had on the heavy seas, it's made his legs bad, and probably just had some messed up knees or something. And they talked a bit more shit, and after the king mentioned dancing, the herald sprang to fetch his lyre, and several of the men danced. Then Broadsea, the man who won the wrestling match, told the king that he would give the man, Odysseus, a sword. The king made sure that Odysseus had fresh clothes and had their maids run him a hot steaming bath, and afterwards he went to eat with the king and queen. The herald sang about the cunning trap that Odysseus brought to Troy. And it absolutely talks about the wooden horse here, but I was under the impression that was in the Aeneid, not the Odyssey, but it looks like this is where Virgil got his inspiration. I initially thought that he had kind of pulled that out of his ass, but it does talk about that in Book 8 of the Odyssey. And as the herald is singing the Troy song, Odysseus starts weeping again. He's just pretty sensitive at this point, I guess, and the king notices him. This time he told the singer to lay the lyre down and asked the man, the stranger, to tell his story. And truly, why does he weep when he hears of the fall of Troy? Book 9. And in my opinion, this is like the real meat of the Odyssey. It's when it really gets started. Odysseus, the great storyteller, launched into his story. Let me begin by telling you my name. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, and sunny Ithaca is my home. I know no sweeter sight on earth. He tells of the winds that drove him out of Ilium to the Cyclone's stronghold, where his men and himself sacked the city, but the men did not leave, and the Cyclone's neighbors came to help fight. A few of Odysseus's men were killed, but the rest rode away from certain doom. While escaping their deaths, the men were sick at heart for their companions they had lost. After 2 whole days at sea, when dawn brought on the 3rd day, they could see home, and in an instant a tide ripped, and the north wind drove them way off course past Cythera. For 9 days the rough and deadly winds tossed them about on the sea, and on the 10th day they reached the land of the lotus eaters, people who ate the lotus, mellow fruit and flower. He sends 3 men to go see who lives on the island, but the people were giving them lotus to eat, and this makes the men stop giving a shit about anything. They just want to sit there eating lotus all day. And he finally gets to his men and brought them back and made sure no one else eats this frickin' lotus, or they'd never get home. They then go to their ship and sail off again until reaching the land of the Cyclops. And there they slept on the beach. And at dawn they rose and grabbed their bows and hunting spears. They killed some goats and spent the evening whining and dining. And they could hear the Cyclops' voices, and they could see their smoke. The following day, Odysseus ends up grabbing a few of his guys to go to the Cyclops' lair. And they found his lair and a big flock of sheep and goats. And here Odysseus had most of his men stay on the boat, but himself and a dozen of his finest took a skin of wine the priest of Apollo gave them, and went to search for a monster. The Cyclops was out ranging his flock, so the men didn't find him. They did find some cheese and some lambs, and Odysseus' men tried to convince him to just grab some of that shit and get back to the boat. But I guess Odysseus wanted to see this monster. So they made a fire and waited for the Cyclops to return. When Polyphemus returned, he puts a giant rock slab in the doorway, and it said that it was so big that 22 wagons couldn't move it. What's with this number? 22 wagons. I think, 22 or more, 22, 23, 24 wagons could probably move that, but any less than 22, we just could not do it. Weird numbers. He does his chores and notices the strangers hiding in a dark part of the room, and he asks them who they were and where they come from. Odysseus answers him and says they're men from Achaea and bound from Troy. Battling home on a strange route, Zeus brought them here. Polyphemus said that he did not believe in Zeus and asked where the boat was moored. Odysseus, feeling something was up here, lied and said that the ship was wrecked by Poseidon and they barely made it to the island alive. Suddenly, the Cyclops grabbed 2 men at once, knocks them out by slamming them on the ground, and their brains gushed out all over and soaked the floor and eats them whole, ripping them limb from limb, and like a mountain lion, devoured entrails, flesh and bones, marrow and all. Odysseus' men cried out to Zeus, while the Cyclops washed the 2 men he ate down with raw milk and went to bed. And while he slept, Odysseus wanted to climb on top of this fucking slash him open with his sword. But how would he move this giant freaking boulder? The next morning, Polyphemus woke up, he did some chores, ate another 2 dudes, and then drove his sheep from his cave. And while he was out, Odysseus and his men noticed what must have been the mast of a black ship, so big it must have had 20 oars. This was the Cyclops' club. Odysseus and his men chopped off a fathom's length and shaved it to a point, and placed it in a fire to char it good, and hid it under some dung in the cave. So I guess there was Cyclops shit all over the place. And his plan was to hoist the giant point into the Cyclops' eye while he was sleeping. When Polyphemus returned, he brought his flock inside, and the night before they were outside. But he comes home, he does some chores, and then makes another 2-man meal, beating them down, blood and guts all over the place. And Odysseus comes out with wine they had brought and pours Polyphemus a bowl, and he swallows it down. And after demanding another bowl, he loosens up and starts talking to the sly-talking king, Odysseus. And he asks his name, and Odysseus says his name is Nobody, and that's what he's called. And then, before Polyphemus toppled over, he tells him as a gift he will eat Nobody last, and then he spouts out wine with some human flesh while he passed out drunk. Odysseus and his men put the stake in the fire again to get it red hot, and with the courage from the gods, they ram it into the sleeping giant's eye and bore it around and around, just really getting into that eye, Its crackling roots blazed and hissed. The men backed up and let him go wild. Polyphemus screamed out for his Cyclops buddies, and they came to investigate, and they asked what had happened, but he's just going off how nobody did this, and nobody took his eye out. And his Cyclops buds just have a big laugh and said Zeus was probably punishing him for something. And then they left. All the while, Odysseus is trying to figure out their exit. He notices all the rams, and who knows how he had the time or tools for this, and his plan is to have the rams stand in threes. Listen to this shit. So they're standing three in threes side by side, and there's a man in the middle holding on to like the chest of a ram. And I'm not sure, like I said, they have no tools or anything. I guess it's just a kung fu grip. You're going to hold on to this or you're going to die, fucker. How did the rams allow this? I'm not sure, but we're just going to go with it. But this plan works. When the Cyclops wakes up, all blind and bloody, he has to let his flock out. He doesn't want to starve on top of everything else, so he lets his flock out and only fills the backs of these animals. And that's how they get out of this situation. As they get to the ship, Odysseus taunts the Cyclops and makes him super pissed. And then while taunting him before they shove off to sea, he yelled his name. He said, "If any man on earth asks you who blinded you, say Odysseus gouged your eye, Laertes' son, who makes his home Ithaca." And this fucking idiot, he tells him everything except his damn address. And I guess the Cyclops had heard a prophecy about this and just started screaming for his dad to avenge him for being made eyeless. And his dad heard him and was pretty upset about it himself. So they sailed off to escape their death, sick at heart for their dead comrades. Book 10. They reached the Aeolian island next, home of Hippotas' son, Aeolus. And this king sired 6 sons and 6 daughters. And it was kind of Ptolemaic. He gave his daughters to his sons as wives. Anyway, they treated Odysseus well here and wined and dined him for a month. Odysseus tells him their Cyclops story, and the king gives him a bag of wind to help him return home. Zeus gave it to him or something like that. And for 9 days they sailed home towards Ithaca. On the 10th day, they could see Ithaca, but an enticing sleep took over them. And while he was passed out, his men grabbed the wind bag, and I guess you need to be careful with that shit. Just let out a little bit at a time. But they let all the wind out, and a sudden squall struck the ship and sent it back to the Aeolian Islands again. Odysseus tried to ask the king for another wind bag, but the king was upset they were back and told him the gods must despise him and told him he better hit the road. So Odysseus and his men departed with heavy hearts. Hey, King Alcinous, you remember that bag of wind you gave me? I was just wondering, when you were like hanging out with Zeus or whatever, like did he happen to give you another bag? Because my guys, I fell asleep and my guys, they really screwed that up, and I still need to get home. Must have been an awkward conversation. Okay, after 6 days and nights of rowing, on the 7th day, they landed on the Laestrygonian land. This wasn't the land of the Cyclops, but it was still a land of giants. And he sends 3 of his men out to scope the area, where they run into Aniphates' daughter. And Aniphates was the Laestrygonian king, by the way. So his daughter takes them to the palace to meet her parents, and when the king arrives, he snatches up one of the men and ate him for supper. So they just keep running into fucking giants that are eating them. And the other 2 men run back to the ship, and they piss the king off, and he starts screaming for his other giants to get them in, and hundreds of giants start throwing boulders and shit at the crew, and they speared the crew like fish. They demolished every boat except for Odysseus's, and from there they sailed, glad to escape their death, and finally reached the island of Aeaean. This is a weird-ass word, Aeaean. I'm not sure how to say that. The home of Circe, the nymph with lovely braids who could speak with a human voice. And on the 3rd day of being there, Odysseus kills a stag and brings it back to his men to eat, and they do that. Afterwards, they split into 2 groups and searched the island. Eurylochus led one group, and Odysseus led another. So Eurylochus' group finds Circe's palace, and she's just in there singing all nice, but Eurylochus could sense a trap. But his men couldn't, and they went inside, and she turned them into swine. She erased their brains from home, and they went to their pens sobbing and squealing, while Circe flung acorns and other common fodder for the hogs. Eurylochus ran back to the boat, but for a while he was too stunned by what had transpired to be able to talk. Eventually they got the story out of him, and Odysseus grabbed his sword and went to find the nymph. And as he's doing this, he passes Hermes, god of the golden wand. And Hermes gives him a magic herb to give to Circe to shield him from the fate of his shipmates. Circe will make him a potion, but the herb will keep it from affecting him. And then rush her quickly with his sword, and this will make her cower in fear and ask him to sleep with her. And he better do this too. But first, she has to swear she won't think up another plan to harm him. And this is how this unfolds, basically. And what a weird thing. I mean, he has to rush her and scare her, and then she has to ask him to sleep with her, and he better do it, but she's got to promise. I mean, they believed, swear, I guess. I would consider a swear like a promise. I think they believe, if she promised you, she can't go back on that. All right, Hermes goes back to Olympus, and after doing what he said, Odysseus mounts Circe's gorgeous bed, so they must have had a good time there. And after that, her handmaids give him a bath and rubbed him down with oil, and then tried to feed him. But he wouldn't eat. He told Circe he could not eat, knowing his men were swine. And at that moment, Circe grabs her wand and turns the swine back to men. They end up staying there for a year. Finally, Odysseus' men remind him of Ithaca. Hey, you remember your wife and shit and your kids? And how they need to get the hell off of Circe's island. So he goes back to Circe and tells him he needs to go. And she tells him he must travel down to the house of death and consult with the ghost Tiresias, seer of Thebes. And this crushed the heart inside Odysseus. And the next day, Odysseus gets his men together and tells them Circe told him the way home, and they had to go to the house of death. And this broke his shipmates' hearts. Book 11. With a little help from some wind Circe gave them, the ship made it to the beach of Cimmerian people. I'm going with Cimmerian. It starts with a C, but I'm still going with Cimmerian. And there he poured out libations to all the dead, made them promises that he would slaughter some animals for them, and then said some prayers to Persephone, the almighty god of death and dread. And then he starts talking with some ghosts. First one is a man that died at Circe's. He came to him and told Odysseus he had fell from a roof and broke his neck, and that's why he's there. And then his mother ghost was there, and then the famous Theban prophet Tiresias shows up. Tiresias tells Odysseus that Poseidon is still pissed about his son and is going to make his way back to living hell. He's going to the Thrinacian island where he'll find herds of fat flocks, and these are the cattle of Helios, but he must not harm them. If he does, his ship and men will all be destroyed, and he will return home a broken man. And once returning home, Odysseus will take care of the suitors, and after that he must go to the people who know nothing of the sea to sacrifice some animals for Poseidon. And then he will find himself a painless death in ripe old age. Finally, he gets to talk to his mom, and she tells Odysseus that she killed herself in grief over him being gone and possibly dead, but his pops is still kicking. He sees some other female ghosts and talks a bit more, and then Agamemnon tells him how he had been murdered by his wife and lover. And he sees some heroes from Troy like Achilles, Ajax, and finally Heracles, before he sees hordes of the dead surging around him. Odysseus panics for a second before busing it back to his ship and commanding his men to take off again. Book 12. The ship lands on the island of Aeaea, and the men sleep until dawn's first light. After burning one of their dead companions, Circe brings them some food and drink. And they sit there all day, eating and drinking until the men pass out. And Circe tells Odysseus that he'll pass the island of the Sirens, and he must keep his men from hearing their songs. Whoever hears the siren's voice will not sail home, but his men are supposed to tie him to the ship's mast, and he will hear the songs. He's going to tell his men to let him free, but they're to tighten the ropes more. After that, he's going to go past a 6-headed monster with 12 legs called Scylla, and she'll probably kill 6 of his men, but that's better than all of his men. Then Circe repeats what Tiresias told him about the cattle of Helios on the island of Thrinacia, and not to harm them in any way. And Circe gives them a boost of wind, and they take off again. And they do the siren thing for some reason, and I'm a little unclear about this because I thought just hearing the siren's voice was enough to fuck your shit up, but I guess he's supposed to. But he stuffs his men's ears with beeswax so they wouldn't hear anything, and they tie him to the mast. Everything happens as described by Circe, and they pass Scylla and Charybdis. So Charybdis was a monster, and I think of this as like a Lovecraftian monster. It never says exactly what it is, but it says that it's a monster that swallows the sea, I think 3 times a day. So Scylla might get 6 of your guys, but Charybdis was certain death. And Scylla does get 6 of them, the toughest and strongest hands Odysseus had. They could hear the 6 men screaming in pain, but the rest made it to Thrinacia, and he tells his men not to touch the herds or they'll be fucked. They were stranded on this island for a month, and their food started to run out. Eurylochus rallied up some men to go kill some of Helios's herds, and Helios was pissed, so he asked Father Zeus to punish Odysseus's men, and Zeus said sure. He would tear their racing ship to splinters. And finally, after 6 days of eating Helios's cattle, Zeus gives them some nice wind, and they're off again. Zeus then destroys their ship with thunder, and Odysseus finds himself on a makeshift raft and rides it like a wild water horse. His raft gets swallowed by Charybdis, but he hangs on a fig tree. And I believe if you think this, like Charybdis is like the face in the water, in the ocean, in the sea, whatever we're talking about here. So the fig tree, from what I understand, was like on the top of his face, like not in his mouth. It was on top of his face. But Charybdis vomits his raft back up. And Odysseus drifts for 9 days, and on the 10th day, he lands on Calypso's island, Ogygia. And that's where we're going to leave this story today. Right where we started, more or less. Odysseus is stranded on Calypso's island, her captive for the next 7 years, alone in the world of monsters and gods. But thanks for hanging out. We'll be back in 2 weeks to finish the story of Odysseus and find out if he finally makes it home. If you go see Chris Nolan's flick, let us know how the story adds up to the original. If you like the episode, give us a like and a review. That really helps with the algorithms. If you have something else to say or a good subject to explore, leave a comment or send an email to stoned-ape-pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook at the Stoned Ape Podcast with Wes Ranson. And if you like your podcast on YouTube, we're at youtube.com/@thestonedapepod. We'll have links down below for our socials and a link to our Patreon. Thanks again and have a chill day.